Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Hey there, it's Myriam with Before You Buy. Check it out. I've got the YotaPhone 2 today. This is a dual screen phone. Check it out. Eink in the back, AMOLED in front. In terms of spec, it's pretty much a Nexus 5. So let me show you a little bit closer and personal how this phone stacks up. So it's a pretty high-end device. It's pretty competitive today. On top, you have a 1080p 5-inch AMOLED panel. It's a really, really beautiful panel. You'd expect that from AMOLED. You can see the blacks are black, colors pop, but they don't pop overly. So this is a really well-sorted 5-inch AMOLED panel. You've got the usual speaker up here, a 2-megapixel front-facing camera, a bunch of sensors to detect, your face and light, etc. No buttons, obviously. These are all on screen, like more and more phones are doing. And then if you flip it over, obviously you have this e-ink display. And the e-ink is really interesting because it consumes no power when it's just static, only when the display gets refreshed, which is really interesting because it means this phone can go on the back display for several days in a row. Also, you can choose. You can say, I want to maybe read a book in sunlight, where this display is going to be a lot more usable, or you can choose to save power when you decide to. So that's kind of the shtick here. But it'll show you, for example, one of the cool things. If I start the camera in the front, the back changes to this graphic. Sometimes it says smile, sometimes it shows a camera. So that way you're kind of aware. The people who you're taking a picture of are aware you're taking a shot of them. It's kind of a cool little interaction. And obviously the camera app was reworked to use the back display to do that. There's a bunch of other configuration apps. You can throw an RSS feed. You can throw your notifications to the back of the phone. Right now I've got the time, the weather, quick shortcuts for phone calls, messages, etc., etc. So I don't have to always unlock my phone. I can just use the back display. As you can see, it's a 4.7 inch. It's a little smaller than the front display, and it's a QHD resolution. That's 960 by 540 pixels. You have an 8-megapixel camera at the top here with an LED flash. It's a bit of a downgrade from the first generation device, which actually had a 13-megapixel camera. But one of the big differences compared to the YotaPhone 1 is that the entire touch panel is touch sensitive rather than just the bottom strip like the original was. That means that this phone can do something that the old one couldn't, and this is mirror the entire Android experience right in the back. So you can decide to have these widgets appear while you use the front screen. Basically, it's a completely seamless Android experience on an e-ink display. And again, you're drawing so little power. If you look at the battery consumption on your Android phones, typically the display, it's labeled as screen in your battery stats, is the killer, right? It's what draws most of the power. So this device can save you quite a bit of battery that way. Now, continuing around in terms of specs, there is usual assortment of buttons. Let me walk you through real quick. There's a headphone jack on the top here, pretty standard fare stuff. Nothing at all on, let me think, this is the left side if you're holding it from the front display, right side if you're holding it from the back display. And then you have a power lock key and a volume rocker on the right-hand side or the left-hand side, depending on how you hold the phone again. What's unique about the volume rocker, last year's YotaPhone, or I should say 2 years ago's YotaPhone, had the SIM tray incorporated in the power lock key. And this year they've got it in the volume rocker. So you can put a little pin in the volume rocker, pull out the SIM. It's a nano SIM this time. Previously it was a micro SIM. Still no micro SD storage on this device. At the bottom here, you have a micro USB charge and data port with a set of speakers. Obviously, microphones are in there too for when you want to make phone calls. What's inside? Snapdragon 801, 2 gigs of RAM, 32 gigs of built-in storage. So no micro SD, but it's a pretty reasonable amount of storage. I'm not quite sure what we're going to get when we get this phone in the US, if we get this phone in the US. There's been rumors that this phone is coming to the US. And this model is a European model. I've got an AT&T SIM in here right now. As you can see, it's HSPA+. There's LTE bands on this device, but they're not compatible with the US. Obviously, if it comes to the US, it will have LTE capability. And so if it does have LTE, I expect that it'll be compatible with AT&T and T-Mobile, et cetera. Or maybe they'll work out a carrier deal. The one thing you should keep in mind, sure, you're looking at a flagship. Pretty much, last year's kind of spec in terms of flagships. So you're looking at essentially what an Nexus 5 would be like. But what you're getting is this extra display, but that costs you money. And the prices right now are really hard to tell because the Russian, it's a Russian company, YotaPhone. The ruble is varying a lot in price. So it's $600 to $700 best case scenario right now to import this phone, and you still won't get LTE. So keep that in mind if you're interested in getting this. Perhaps waiting for the carrier version in the US might be a better way to go. So in terms of pros, I think the killer app of this phone is the back display, this Eink panel. It really seems gimmicky, but once you start using it, especially with a full touch layer like this, it becomes really useful. The mirroring option, bright sunlight is beautiful. You save a lot of energy. You can have your favorite books ready to read in the back here as PDFs or as ebooks. And of course, YotaPhone has an API that lets developers take advantage of this back display while the front display is in use. So, there's a lot of potential here in the future. And to me, that's the biggest pro. The other pro is it is a pretty full-featured phone. You can't go wrong. Plain Android, all the specs you'd expect. It's kind of last year's spec, but it's still very respectable today and this year. Cons, the camera. The main camera is 8 megapixels. Was 13 last year. It's not about megapixels, but ultimately I find this camera a little disappointing. Last year's YotaPhone, last generation, was passable for 13, but this seems to be a little bit worse. But it's serviceable. But we get so spoiled with cameras today that I would say if you're into photography, this is something you should be aware of. The other con is the price. Right now it's $600 to $700 at least. Best case, unlocked, imported, without LTE support for the US. So until we actually have some pricing and announcement on a US carrier like it's been rumored, it's really hard to tell. So in a nutshell, this is a pretty state-of-the-art phone. It's a little pricey. Should you buy it? Yes, perhaps. I would say a try is the best until we get this in the US on a carrier and we have proper LTE band support. But compared to its original YotaPhone 1, this is a thoroughly better phone, a much better experience. And yeah, as such, I recommend it as a try.